It goes beyond Reconstruction just a bit. It actually covers some topics that go into, heck, all the way up to the 1890s, about 1900. So that's what's covered today. So when we're talking about Reconstruction, you got to go back to Lincoln. And you got to go back to what Lincoln's mindset is going into the end of the Civil War. And he kind of sets the tone for what he thinks the post-Civil War period should be like in his second inaugural address. And what is the tone that you're hearing in that inaugural address? Malice toward none, charity for all. Okay, that's it. I like it. You put it in your own words that we don't want to create any bad blood. We want this Civil War to be wrapped up as quickly and painlessly as possible. If we start doing victory dances, if we start spiking the ball in the face of Southerners, all that's going to do is just create more sectional division, bad blood, animosity. We don't want to do that. So Lincoln's attitude is to be lenient, go easy on the South. Now, he puts it in place before he dies. He puts in place a number of ideas. First off, is the Freedmen's Bureau. And we talked about the Freedmen's Bureau, yes? Did we get to this? Okay, all right. Slaves are free. Yay! Great, now what? Do they get land? Do they have jobs? Do they get paid? Can they take out loans? Can they vote? Do they have citizenship rights? It's great that the 13th Amendment, ratified in January 1865, takes the Emancipation Proclamation and puts it in the Constitution. But what does that mean now? Hold on a second, 2 seconds. Can I pause this? Doesn't have a pause. All right. So Lincoln says we need to create an agency that eases the adjustment from slavery to freedom. So the Freedmen's Bureau is designed to fit that bill. A government agency to aid free blacks, help set up work contracts and agreements. Since they're no longer slaves, they have to get paid for their work. Well, how are they going to agree on a salary? Who are they going to work for? What is the length of their work contract, et cetera, et cetera. So the Freedmen's Bureau is kind of like the middleman to help put workers and employers together. The other thing that the Freedmen's Bureau does is it emphasizes education. From the elementary level all the way up to the college level, the great legacy of the Freedmen's Bureau is the establishment of schools in the South for free blacks. Now, they are mainly, first of all, they're segregated, blacks only. A lot of these schools are taught by whites who have moved from the North to the South to help with Reconstruction. Some people would call them carpetbaggers. But they also go about establishing colleges as well, what you would call HBCs, historically black colleges, the most well-known being Howard University, named after the general who ran the Freedmen's Bureau, Oliver O. Howard. Howard University is named after a white guy. And he was the administrator of the Freedmen's Bureau. So this is something that is put in place. Would anybody find this controversial? What would be let me put it this way. what would be the controversy? If somebody wanted to stir the pot, what would be the controversy they would find with this? Yeah.
They would go back to the Supreme Court decision that they're not citizens, so they don't get any of this.
The 13th Amendment solves all of that. Slaves are now free people, so they're not going to go back to Dred Scott. Yeah. Yeah, hey, why is it that blacks get free stuff? What about the rest of us? Where's our agency? Why don't we get stuff? Why isn't there a white man's agency or a white man's bureau? I mean, if Fox News were around, you could hear that already. So there's going to be, just put it on my desk, please. Thanks. There's going to be a lot of animosity about this agency among the white community, and especially in the South among white Southerners. There's going to be a lot of animosity regarding this. Lincoln puts in place what he calls the 10% plan. This is a lenient plan that Lincoln puts in place where only 10% of a southern state's population has to swear a loyalty oath to the Union. They adopt the 13th Amendment, iggity aggity ook, the state is reconstructed. That's it. Nice and easy. No punishment, no redraw your Constitution, no reapply for admission to the Union, nothing like that. Nice and easy. 10% swear an oath of loyalty, ratify the 13th Amendment, acknowledge that slaves are free, and you can go about your merry way. Lincoln wants this to be quick and painless. Now, there are people within Lincoln's own party. Benjamin Wade, Henry Winter Davis. They believe that the South needs to be punished, that the South had started this war. It had been a war over slavery. It had been a war over states' rights, that South Carolina had fired the first shot. 600,000 people are dead because the South wanted to have their way. And so, therefore, there should be a punishment meted out. 600,000 people should not have died in vain. And they propose the Wade-Davis bill, which is a more punitive bill, punishing bill, that requires a 50% loyalty oath. It also requires a state to reapply for admission to the Union, which strikes at the very heart of the nature of secession. Are states allowed to secede from the Union? Lincoln says no. These guys say, yep, you left, you've got to come back in. On your knees, please. And they also propose black suffrage as well. Lincoln rejects the Wade-Davis bill. This passes the House, it passes the Senate, it reaches Lincoln's desk, and Lincoln does nothing with it. He doesn't veto it, he doesn't sign it, he puts it in a drawer and lets it expire. It's called a pocket veto. But essentially, Lincoln does nothing with the Wade-Davis bill because he knows that this will create animosity. It will create ill feelings and division, and he doesn't want that. This is not leniency. So there's differences of opinion within the Republican Party as to how to proceed. And this would all be great if Lincoln lived. Lincoln would be able to ride the divisions in his party. Lincoln had that personality. But the great conundrum, I would argue, the great damage that is done to the South comes from John Wilkes Booth. When Lincoln is killed, but whatever, I can't worry about it. When Lincoln is killed, Northerners, and in particular Republicans, want to get revenge on the South. But the successor to Lincoln is not of that vein. If you recall, in the 1864 election, after the Battle of Atlanta, when Lincoln's re-election was secured, Lincoln had nominated a new vice president, Tennessee Democrat Andrew Johnson. Highly irregular. He had changed the name of the Republican Party to the Union Party in order to emphasize unity and togetherness. That's why Johnson was put on the ticket. Now you've got a Southern Democrat running Reconstruction of the South. And, Republicans look at that and they say, well, that's a rooster in the hen house right there. Actually, more like a fox in the hen house. Because when Johnson takes over Reconstruction, he starts issuing pardons. Everybody's pardoned. No fault, no foul, no harm. Go about your merry way. Amnesty and pardons for everybody. People showed up at the White House and in droves and applied for pardons. And he gave them out. About the only group of people who did not receive pardons from Johnson were the wealthy planter elites. He didn't like wealthy planter elites. He was a mountain white from eastern Tennessee. He had grown up as a tailor's apprentice. He was a hardscrabble guy. He was a poor white guy from the mountains of eastern Tennessee who had made good. And so he never trusted, never liked the planter elites, and so planter elites could not get, or if they did get an amnesty, they had to really beg for it. And he enjoyed that. But in general, most Southerners got pardons, and Southerners went back to doing things the way they knew how to do them. So under presidential Reconstruction, all is forgiven, and now you've got former Confederates who the previous year had been in the Confederate government. And I always think of Alexander Stephens, the vice president of the Confederate States of America, shows up in Washington, D.C. with his suitcase, ready to assume his role as senator from Georgia. Like nothing happened. And people are looking around and they're looking at Stephens and these other guys who are looking to take their seats in Congress, and they're like, wait a minute, didn't we just fight a civil war? Didn't we just have 600,000 people killed, and these guys are back like nothing happened? Shouldn't there be something done? So there is a great debate between the president, who really believes he's carrying out Lincoln's plan here, and the congressional Republicans who say, this is unacceptable. One of the things that Southern governments start doing is they've got to square the circle that blacks are free. All right, great. We'll ratify the 13th Amendment. Great. Blacks are free. Fantastic. They're still limited in what they can do. They still don't have a lot of freedom. They don't have rights. They don't have due process. They don't have equal protection under the law. A lot of Southern states, after presidential Reconstruction, started passing what were called black codes. Now, black codes looked a heck of a lot like slave codes. And as a matter of fact, a lot of Southern states just took the slave codes that were on the books, erased the word slave, put the word black in there. There you go. So basically, blacks under presidential Reconstruction are treated the same way they had been treated as slaves. Only now, they got to pay to live where they live. Relegating free men to a second-class status, trying to maintain white supremacy in the South. That was the purpose of the black codes. Blacks are still subjugated, and there are still rules and restrictions on what blacks can and cannot do. So while the 13th Amendment provided freedom for blacks, the black codes made sure that they got around it. And a lot of Northern Republicans said, see, it's in the Southerners' DNA to act like this. We need to do something. We didn't just fight a civil war so that Southern politicians could resume their seats in Congress and blacks could go back to being treated the way they were being treated before the Civil War. Nothing has been solved. Nothing has been changed. So the Republicans, the radical Republicans in Congress, are going to run against Andrew Johnson and his presidential reconstruction plan, and they are going to win big time in the 1866 midterm elections. So that by 1867 in March, when the new Congress comes in, Republicans have a veto-proof majority in the House and the Senate. The Republican Congress can ram through anything they want and be able to override President Johnson's veto. Sometimes it's called congressional reconstruction, sometimes it's called radical reconstruction, but it is going to be a punitive reconstruction that looks a heck of a lot more like the Wade Davis bill. Loyalty oaths punish. Loyalty oaths are demanded. States had to reapply for admission to the Union. Radicals are going to pass amendments regarding black citizenship and black voting. Black males are going to get the right to vote in 1870 under radical reconstruction. Former Confederates will not be allowed to vote. If you served in the Confederate Congress, can't vote, can't serve. If you served as a Confederate governor, can't vote, can't serve. Confederate assemblyman, can't vote, can't serve. Confederate dog catcher, can't vote, can't serve. The radical Republicans are going to significantly disenfranchise Southern whites. They are not going to be allowed to vote or govern. And that word, disenfranchise, to take away the right to vote. The franchise is the right to vote. Black males are enfranchised. In 1870, they're given the right to vote. Whites in the South are disenfranchised during radical Reconstruction. They are not allowed to vote or govern. The government is going to send military occupation into the South. They're going to divide the South into military districts, each one governed by a general, to make sure that these laws and reforms are being put in place to protect blacks. And at every turn, Republicans are going to blame Democrats for the Civil War. It's called waving the bloody shirt, reminding voters that it had been Southern Democrats who started the Civil War. And that's really how the Republicans are able to maintain pretty much majority control of the government for the next 50 to 70 years. Between 1865 and 1932, if you had a Democrat as president, his name was Cleveland or Wilson. That's it. Otherwise, this becomes a Republican-dominated country. So that is a major political change as a result of Reconstruction. Democrats are a minority party. They're the ones to blame for the Civil War. It allows for the Republicans to hold the majority and pass Republican bills, Republican ideas. Pro-business, railroads, internal improvements, siding with big business and factories. High protective tariffs, that sort of thing. And Johnson, by the way, is going to use his veto power to no avail. Johnson holds the record for the most vetoes overridden by Congress, 15. Congress passed it, Johnson vetoed it, Congress overrode the veto, Congress got their way. So whatever executive power Lincoln had as president during war, those powers are taken away. They are subsumed by the Congress. Congress now becomes the dominant body in the nation. It's why you got a bunch of no-names there. I mean, who in the world's ever heard of Chester Arthur? Or James Garfield? Or Rutherford Hayes? I mean, bearded, bewhiskered nobodies. Because Congress was the dominant branch of government, not the president. It's not until a president exerts executive power that you actually hear of a president, or he gets a statue, or a carving, or gets put on the money. So Jefferson exerted executive power. Washington exerted executive power. Jackson exerted executive power. Lincoln exerted executive power. And the next time you have somebody exerting executive power, it's Teddy Roosevelt. May not have heard of James Garfield, but I know you've all heard of Teddy Roosevelt. Well, there's a reason for that. Johnson believed it was his duty to prevent the Congress from overreaching on Reconstruction. For instance, the Civil Rights Act of 1866. This had been a bill that the Republicans in Congress had passed prior to their veto-proof majority. It allowed for citizenship rights. It basically said if you're born on American soil, you're an American citizen. It allowed for due process and equal protection under the law for American citizens. And that the government was not allowed to discriminate against citizens on the basis of race. So this was all very noble stuff that Johnson vetoed. Now, in 1866, he also vetoed the Freedmen's Bureau as well. He didn't think blacks should be getting special treatment. Because keep in mind, he's a white Southerner. He's just as racist as every other white Southerner at the time. So in 1866, Congress doesn't have the ability to do anything about it. But in 1867, they take this and they make it into an amendment. The 14th Amendment, ratified in 1867, over the opposition of Johnson. And in the 14th Amendment, And by the way, the 14th Amendment is probably the most widely used amendment in legal cases because it is so nebulous. You could interpret it to mean anything. What does what does due process mean? It means whatever you want it to mean. What does equal protection under the law mean? You could interpret that however you want. Government can't discriminate. It says the government can't discriminate. How about the individual? Can the individual discriminate? Does this prevent the individual from being a jerk? Prevents the government from being a jerk. So this amendment, this 14th Amendment that's going to be ratified over Johnson's opposition, is going to establish, a wide range of rights in this bill. The Freedmen's Bureau is also going to be renewed in 1867 despite Johnson's opposition. The Military Reconstruction Act of 1867 divides the South into 5 military districts, each governed by a general. Those generals and Union troops are there to ensure that black freedom, black rights, black citizenship, and ultimately black voting are enshrined, are ensured. Southern states are also forced to rewrite their constitutions to put in equal protection clauses and enshrine voting rights in their state constitutions. And they have to do it at the end of a gun, at the end of a bayonet. They're called bayonet constitutions. Because the Union, the Army, is forcing them to rewrite their constitutions. So you've got Union troops occupying the South, Union forces forcing Southerners to rewrite their constitutions, forcing black citizenship, forcing black equal rights, forcing black voting on Southern whites. You got the Freedmen's Bureau providing help and aid to blacks. You're a Southern white. How do you feel? How do you feel, Jonathan? Don't feel too good. Absolutely not. You're wondering why there's so much sectional animosity between North and South. It's still there today. Generations later, it's still there. Yeah.
Before the Civil War, they were worried that the government was trying to take away their states' rights.
Yep.
And that's pretty much what they're doing.
That's exactly what the government is doing. They are totally subsuming states' rights. States' rights as a philosophy kind of goes out the window after the Civil War. The idea of secession goes out the window after the Civil War. It was, prior to the Civil War, could a state secede? Some said yes, some said no. Lincoln said no, others said yes. After the Civil War, secession's not even debated. You cannot secede from the Union. Oh, had Lincoln lived, that's a great what if. Had Lincoln lived, would there be the sectional animosity? Would there be the division? Would there be the clash between North and South? But then again, would blacks have gotten any rights? Because Lincoln was just eager to, sweep all of it under a carpet and move on. And maybe that was a bit short-sighted as well. So the Military Reconstruction Act, the Freedmen's Bureau, punishing the South, and then the ratification of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. All of these are legacies of congressional Reconstruction and the radicals in Congress. And by the way, notice we haven't had an amendment to the Constitution since the 12th Amendment allowed the number 1 to pick the number 2 on the presidential ballot back in 1801. So it took a major crisis to lead to a flurry of amendment activity. You get 3 amendments out of the Civil War. You get 4 amendments at the turn of the century. Good Lord, I wonder what the problems are during the Gilded Age. But you get the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th Amendment in the early part of the 20th century. And keep in mind, folks, there are only 27 amendments to the Constitution. Last time the Constitution was amended was 1992. And prior to that, 1971. 26th Amendment gave 18-year-olds the right to vote. So, freedom for blacks, citizenship for blacks, the right to vote for black males, which, by the way, the women's suffrage movement is just apoplectic about that. Susan B. Anthony, she's like, what? Say what? All of it enforced by Union troops on Southern soil. And now blacks are participating in government. Not only are they voting, they're participating. They're running for office. They're being elected mayor, assemblyman, representative, dare I say, senator. Whites claim that they are being governed by black Republicans, that this is reconstruction by Negro, they called it Negro rule. Now look, let's be honest. Southerners have a tendency to be a bit hyperbolic. They get their panties in a wad easily. The myth of Negro rule, you had a couple of senators here and there. You had a black lieutenant governor in Louisiana. The South Carolina state legislature was majority black because the state is majority black. And really, you only had blacks in Congress. I mean, Blanche K. Bruce, Hiram Revels, the first black senators in United States history. They're both from Mississippi. But really, these guys are in office, I'd say 1872 to 1880. That's it. By the time Reconstruction's over with, the white Southerners are back in charge, and they find new and creative ways to keep blacks from voting and participating in government. By 1880, Negro rule is over. By the way, you want a crazy stat? Here's a crazy stat for you. Barack Obama, when he was elected senator from Illinois in 2004, was only the 5th black senator ever elected. 5th in 2004. You got 2 during Reconstruction. So if white Southerners aren't allowed to hold office or govern or anything like that, there aren't a lot of blacks who are going to be governing. So who's going to do the governing? There's a lot of opportunities. Mayor, councilman, senator, representative, building planners, architects, sanitation, infrastructure work. There's a lot of construction and reconstruction to be done in the South. A lot of opportunity. Yes, they are called carpetbaggers. A lot of Northerners are going to pack their bags and move south to take jobs that Southerners cannot hold. Now, some of them are Northern reformers looking to recreate the South, help out. They have nothing but altruistic motives. Good motives. Nice motives. But some of them are Northern shysters, looking to line their pockets, take advantage of the fact that Southerners are prostrate. Prostrate, not prostate. Prostrate, being forced to lay flat on the floor. So some had noble intentions, others not so noble, but carpetbaggers in general have a negative connotation. Southerners did not like the fact that Northerners were moving into their area and telling them what to do and how to do it. But even worse than the carpetbaggers were the Southerners who helped. Southerners who helped the North, who helped the Union. Those guys were reprehensible. They were traitors to their region. While carpetbaggers may have been frowned upon, who are the Southern helpers, the collaborators? Scalawags. That's right. You got your carpetbaggers here, but even worse were your scalawags. Now, when I was in high school, I used to mix up my carpetbaggers and my scalawags. I couldn't keep who's a carpetbagger and who's a scalawag. I know they're both bad. Easy way to remember it. Scalawag, S. Southerner, S. There you go. That's right. All right, all right. I didn't mean to get all Matthew McConaughey on you. All right, all right, all right. Scalawags were Southerners who helped in the reconstruction efforts and aided the Republican governments. They were seen as traitors. Most notorious of the scalawags was this man right here, old Mutton Chops McGee. Now, Mutton Chops McGee. This is James Longstreet. You Civil War buffs should know who James Longstreet is. Anybody in here a Civil War buff? Nobody knows who James Longstreet is? Was? James Longstreet was Robert E. Lee's number 2. Allow me to introduce my number 2. His name, number 2. So, yes, James Longstreet. Robert E. Lee's number 2. No. But Longstreet was the guy. Longstreet was the guy at Gettysburg who said to Robert E. Lee, you know what? Maybe Pickett's charge is a bad idea. Pickett's charge the third day at Gettysburg. It's where the Confederate thing collapsed and the battle was lost. James Longstreet recognized that that was a bad idea to march a regiment across an open field at a line of artillery. Not a good move. I think at that point Lee was not to get into Civil War trivia, but I think at that point Lee was believing his own hype, that he could do anything. And Longstreet was more of a pragmatist. But here's the other thing. James Longstreet was also a friend of Ulysses Grant. And so Grant got a hold of Longstreet, who was living, I think, in New Orleans at the time, and said, hey, Jimmy, can you help a brother out? Longstreet's like, yeah, buddy, whatever you want, Ulysses. Notice how nobody names their kids Ulysses anymore. What's the deal with that? Where's that name gone? I went to high school with a guy named Ulysses. That was interesting. Anyway, so yeah, Longstreet, scalawags, Southerners that helped out. Now, you've got these radical Republicans promoting black rights, black voting, black participation, Negro rule. They get rights. They get the Freedmen's Bureau. You got carpetbaggers coming here telling us what to do. You got scalawags in our midst telling us what to do. And you've got good, decent, former Confederates who can't do anything, who have no freedom, no rights. Jonathan said that they probably didn't feel too good. Well, what do you think they're going to do about it? What do you think they're going to do? Huh? Riot? Well, they could riot. I mean, they could get their pitchforks out and their torches and get all Frankenstein on you. They're not going to ignore it. You could hide under a pile of coats and hope everything works out in the morning. That's how I solve problems. No, they're going to form local civic organizations to promote their rights. The KKK is a reaction to radical Reconstruction. Lincoln didn't want to create ill feelings. Well, guess what? Here's ill feelings. They're not nice. The hoods, yeah, that's all to show that they represent the ghosts of the Confederate dead. But they used intimidation and violence to prevent blacks from voting and participating in government. They attacked not only blacks, but they attacked carpetbaggers and scalawags as well. There were several carpetbaggers, Northerners, who were killed by the KKK. Now, President Grant, when Grant is elected president in '68, Grant is going to send Union troops to go in and deal with the KKK. Because he literally has a war on terror against the KKK. Well, that's what the KKK is. It is a domestic terrorist organization. Don't tell me it's some sort of civic organization, promoting brotherhood among whites. No, it is a terrorist organization. They are using violence and intimidation to achieve a political end. It's the textbook definition of terrorist. And Grant really is largely successful at tamping down the KKK. He doesn't fully eradicate them, but he does do a pretty good job at keeping them at bay. I mean, Grant gets a bum rap for a number of reasons, mainly because he was dumb. But he does do a good job dealing with the KKK. Lousy president, but good job here. Gets his props. So Congress is basically able to act without opposition. When Grant becomes president in 1869, they've got somebody on their side. But until then, they've got to deal with Andrew Johnson. And the Republicans are kind of, in 1867, kind of feeling their oats. Yeah, we got all this stuff done. Now, if only we could remove Andrew Johnson once and for all. He's not even supposed to be there. If only... Wait a minute. I think I read somewhere that Congress has the power to remove a president. What is that power? To impeach. But the president has to break the law. Break the law. I got it. What if we create a law that we know he's going to break? and we set them up. Yeah, let's do that. And Congress passes, over Andrew Johnson's veto, the Tenure of Office Act. In the words of Admiral Akbar, it's a trap.
That's all.
Admiral Akbar is right. This is a trap. It is a trap laid by Republicans in Congress. The Tenure of Office Act says that if a president wants to fire a cabinet member, they have to first get permission from Congress to do so. Now, the reason why they passed this is because Johnson had made it known that he was intending to fire Lincoln's cabinet and replace them with his own cabinet. So they knew this was coming. They passed the law. Johnson fires Edwin Stanton, the Secretary of War, someone who hates Andrew Johnson. And Congress says, aha! You violated the Tenure of Office Act. We will now impeach you. Now, impeachment does not mean removal from office. To impeach somebody means to put them on trial. So Johnson is impeached. He is put on trial. He is tried in the House. That is where the House, or that's how an impeachment goes. They vote on impeachment in the House. The House acts as the lawyers. The Senate acts as the jury. And the Supreme Court acts as the judge. So he is tried. They have a trial. They lay out all the crimes of Andrew Johnson. And when it comes time for the vote in the Senate, Johnson is acquitted, found not guilty. He remains in office. By the way, how many presidents have been removed from office due to impeachment? 0. Nixon resigned before the impeachment could happen. Clinton was impeached and acquitted. So nobody has been removed from office. So great. Republicans are in charge. Blacks get voting rights. They get citizenship rights. They've got freedom. They've got government protection. They've got all those benefits. So everything should be great, right? I mean, blacks should be, blacks in the South should be, like living large. Should be great. Here's the failure of Reconstruction. You can give people all the freedom in the world, but if you don't give them land, if you don't give them a means by which they can be independent, then they are not really free. And that's the failure of Reconstruction. They did not provide blacks with a means to be economically independent. You can give all the political independence you want. But if you're not going to provide them with economic independence, then they are not really free. They need land, and they don't get it. As a matter of fact, if you look at this map here, this is a plantation prior to the Civil War, big house, slave quarters. Here's the map of the same land after the Civil War. A lot of the slaves who were here prior to the Civil War are still here after the Civil War, just now they have to pay rent. When Sherman marched through Georgia, Sherman recognized the need to redistribute land to blacks. And as a matter of fact, from Atlanta to Savannah, Sherman took plantation land, confiscated it, and gave it to black slaves, freedmen. It was called the 40 acres and a mule rule, Special Field Order 15. Land redistribution. Give them a means to be economically free and independent. Lincoln, of all people, Lincoln, old St. Abe, told Sherman, you can't do that. You've got to give that land back to the plantation owners. You don't have that authority. And so Lincoln essentially screws the pooch, as it were. So a lot of blacks, while they may be politically free, citizenship free, economically, they're not free. They are sharecroppers, they are tenant farmers, they are in debt thanks to the crop lien system. You are creating a constant cycle of poverty and debt within the black community that lasts for generations. Sharecropping is where you owe a percentage of your crops to the person who owns the land. Tenant farming is where you pay rent to live on the land. And a lot of them lived on the land that they had farmed when they were slaves. The crop lien system is where you borrow against your crop futures. Better hope the boll weevil doesn't show up and destroy your cotton crop, otherwise you're screwed. So what winds up happening is freedmen couldn't make enough money to own their own land. They were constantly in hock, constantly in debt. And to me, as a historian, this is the real failure. This is where everybody dropped the ball. Some blacks moved west. Just get out of the South, move west. They were called exodusters. Move west. This is the time of the Old West. Cowboys, Indians, mining opportunities, ranching opportunities. Did you know that 1 in 4 cowboys in the West was black? And aside from watching Unforgiven or Silverado, you'd never know it. 1 in 4 black. But you wind up creating generations of poverty in the South. And poverty leads to second-class citizenship. It leads to lack of educational opportunity. It leads to a diminished standard of living. Ulysses Grant is elected president. God, Devin, leave me alone. My wife texting me constantly, like I have nothing to do. Ulysses Grant is elected in 1868. He is a Union general. He is the most popular man in America. More popular, dare I say, even than Abraham Lincoln at the time. Go back, take a look at the records. He is more popular than Lincoln. Everybody knows who Ulysses Grant is. So he comes into office with very high hopes. He had won the Civil War for the Union. Surely he would make a great president. Yeah, no, not good. Not good. Ulysses Grant is usually ranked at the bottom of American presidents. And yeah?
Didn't he bring his entire family with him?
He did. And his family was corrupt, especially his in-laws. Here's the thing. Grant was a great general. You didn't really have to think too much. Grant is a blunt tool. He is a blunt tool. He knows how to kill people and break things. He knows how to conduct a war. He's not very smart, however. Everything else he touched turned to mud. Matter of fact, prior to the Civil War, he had to move back in with his father. He had to take his wife and kids and move back in with his father in Galena, Illinois, because he had gone bankrupt. Which should give you an indication. Here's a grown man with a family who can't take care of them because he's too stupid to figure out how to survive on his own. Yet, here we are. He's president. And the problem with Grant is his administration gets caught up in all manner of problems, most of which is corruption. The big scandal of the Grant administration, that's what this cartoon is trying to convey, that Grant is trying to balance all of the corruption in his administration. And it's a very difficult task, as you can see. But the big scandal in the Grant administration is what's known as the Credit Mobilier scandal. It is a railroad scandal. Remember, this is the time where railroads are being built. The government wants railroads built to interlink the country. This is a Republican priority. Well, Credit Mobilier was a railroad company that didn't exist. They had offices. They certainly billed the government, but they didn't exist. They billed the government for millions of dollars of work that they never did. And then paid government officials to look the other way so that they wouldn't investigate. How far up did it go? The only person who didn't get rich off the Credit Mobilier scandal was Ulysses Grant, because he was too stupid to know it was going on. Even his vice president was involved, Schuyler Colfax. The Speaker of the House was involved. Senators were involved. Representatives were involved. Everybody was involved. Everybody was getting rich off the Credit Mobilier scandal except Grant. Grant died penniless. The other thing that interrupts the Grant administration is what's known as the Panic of 1873. Remember back during the Civil War when Lincoln, in order to pay for the war, decided to start printing these greenbacks, money above and beyond the value of gold? Well, in 1873, the rich people in America, and you know the rich, they just want to get richer, they tell President Grant, you need to get rid of greenbacks. They're inflating the currency and making the money worthless. If you get rid of greenbacks, the gold will be worth more. And who has the most gold? Rich people. Grant says, okay. And he signs what's called the Resumption Act. And that literally means that the government is going to resume money based on gold only. The money that was greenbacks or the money that was based on silver, that money will be taken out of circulation. So if you've got a pocket full of greenbacks or a pocket full of silver coins, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the bank and exchange it for gold. And you had a mad rush, a panic, dare I say, in 1873. It's sometimes referred to as the crime of 73 because the rich people were conspiring with the government to keep the rich rich and the poor poor. I love how things change. So not only do you have corruption, you've got panic and a depression. You've got labor unions out of control, lobbing bombs into the crowd. You've got fear of revolution. You've got economic panic. You've got businesses closing. You've got people unemployed. You've got immigrants coming to America from all kinds of wacky places like Eastern Europe and Italy and people are and China, and people are like, oh my God, who are these people? The last thing on anybody's mind in 1873, 74, 75 is Reconstruction. Hey, how's that Reconstruction going in the South? And what winds up happening is people wind up taking their eye off the ball. Yeah.
Grant got 2 terms?
Grant got 2 terms. Grant got reelected in the middle of the Credit Mobilier scandal, which will show you how impressive that Republican machine was at waving the bloody shirt and blaming Democrats for the Civil War. Even at a time when people within his cabinet are resigning, Grant gets reelected, and by a larger margin than he did in 1868. Hey, Clinton was impeached and his ratings went up.
Yeah.
Guys, here's the thing. People don't care what you do in office so long as the economy is good. When the economy takes a dump, that's when people start to notice. And that's why in 1874, Democrats start to make gains. It's not because of the corruption, it's because of the panic. People care about their wallet. That's what they care about. And it's the same in 1873 as it is in 2014. People care about pocketbook issues because that directly affects them. Corruption? That's those guys in Washington. Reconstruction? That's those folks down in the South. But panic and depression? That's me. So in the election of 1876, Grant tries to score a 3rd term. The Republicans say, you're a little too toxic, Ulysses. I think you need to go into retirement. And the Republicans nominate a dark horse candidate, a compromise candidate, the Ohio governor, Rutherford Hayes. The Democrats are going to nominate New York Governor Samuel Tilden. And you wind up having one of the closest contested elections in American history, one of the most interesting elections in American history. And what winds up happening is the electoral votes in 3 states are disputed. 3 southern states: Louisiana, South Carolina, and that banana republic they call Florida. Anytime there's an electoral issue, it's freaking Florida. 1876, 2000, doesn't matter, it's Florida. They don't know how to vote down there. Anyway, Louisiana, South Carolina, and Florida are the last 3 states to be under Union control. They're being reconstructed. So there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of shenanigans going on. Nobody really knows who won in those states. So those 3 states send their Democratic electors and their Republican electors to the Electoral College, and they tell Congress, you figure it out. So Congress names an electoral commission to figure out who won the election of 1876. The Electoral Commission is made up of 8 Republicans and 7 Democrats. I wonder who wins. Despite winning the popular vote by, good Lord, 300, Tilden. 036? Yeah. By about 300,000 votes, Tilden won. Samuel Tilden of New York should have been president of the United States in 1876. But instead, you get Rutherford Hayes. Yeah. Yeah. And this is how you get it. The last compromise of the Civil War era. Southerners were threatening to secede again unless they got Tilden as president. And so, to smooth things over, you get the Compromise of 1877. Hayes will be named president in exchange for the end of Reconstruction. So any leftover protections for black civil rights, black voting rights, are gone after 1877. Reconstruction comes to an end. The last Union troops are pulled out. Democrats are back in charge in the South. Those Democrats, and we got to kind of move along here. You're going to be kind of responsible on your own. Look, all these were on the sheet I gave you. The Democrats who are back in charge are called redeemers, bourbons sometimes. They are former Confederates, and when they come back into power, they are going to try to systematically disenfranchise, separate, segregate, and limit the rights of blacks. Segregation, discrimination, limits to black voting all take place under Redeemer rule. Now, what kind of South do you have in 1877 moving forward? Some would argue you've got a reconstructed South, a new South, as it were. A South that looks radically different after the Civil War than existed before the Civil War. This idea of the New South is conveyed by a newspaper man in Atlanta named Henry W. Grady. He's the guy that coins the term the New South. And he argues that the South that comes out of Reconstruction is better off than the South that existed prior to the Civil War. And this is the vision of the New South. Blacks and whites knew their place, but worked together for mutual progress. Whites may have been in charge, blacks and whites may be separate, but they are all working for progress. And the South now had a varied economy. It wasn't just based on cash crops. Southerners start building textile mills. They start building roads, telegraph wire, railroads, industry. There's even an attempt at steel industry in Birmingham, Alabama. Because now mills don't need to run on water power, they run on electric power. So you can build the textile mills right next to the cotton fields. Boom! Grady argued that this was a model of progress. And yeah, whites and blacks weren't living together, But that's okay. Everybody was moving forward. You started to even have the beginnings of a black middle class. And the guy there were other people that promoted this vision of black and white separation, but mutual progress. One of the other guys, and he's always a test question, is Booker T. Washington. After Frederick Douglass leaves the scene, Booker T. Washington becomes kind of the voice of American civil rights in the late 19th, early 20th century. And Washington argues that you are not going to get whites and blacks to love one another overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take work. Washington argues that you need to give blacks educational opportunities to train them to take jobs that pay better than just being a field hand. He argues for vocational education, science, technology, industry, construction. he founds the Tuskegee Institute to put that in place, Tuskegee University today. And if blacks make money, that money will then lead to respect. But you've got to be patient. It's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to get white people to all of a sudden love black people. After 300 years of division and slavery, you're not going to change that overnight. So, get a good education, earn a good living, and you will earn the respect of whites. That is the Booker T. Washington philosophy as outlined in the Atlanta Compromise of 1895. Now, on the flip side, don't just think that everybody's following Booker T. Washington here into the abyss. You've got people like W.E.B. Du Bois. He says, I'm tired of being patient. Blacks have been patient for 300 frickin' years here. We need to have our rights now. Those rights were codified during Reconstruction. They are in the Constitution, and they need to be enforced.
Good morning, Southern High School. Your announcements will be on momentarily.
Du Bois demands immediate equality politically and socially through something called the Niagara Movement. It leads to the founding of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which is an extraordinarily anachronistic term.
Today is January 15th, and Wednesday, a B-Day. Please stand for your Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, as soon as the announcements are over, I'm going to finish this up.
Attention all prospective baseball players. There will be an informational meeting on Wednesday, January 15th after school. Wait, if you're interested in playing baseball and did not attend last week's meeting, you must come today.
Despite insurmountable odds, the Mock
All right,
Trial
I can do that.
Bulldogs held their own against the state champs from Annapolis. Shannon Donnelly, Jonathan Daniels, Kira Lyons, Mary Watts, Mason Connor, and Megan Cockrell may not have won, but they did great.
There will be a meeting after school on Friday for anybody interested in being a part of the outdoor track team.
Jonathan knocked it out of the park as a lawyer last night. Mock trial. Did a great job.
If you cannot make it, please see Mr. Mayberry.
It's hard to believe that we are
Up there
only
arguing,
2 weeks
thinking
away
on his
from
feet.
16th
Loved it.
annual Battle of the Bands.
Loved it.
The bands have been announced as Southern Zone, Crash 57, featuring Tommy Somerville, Nathan Lee, Josh Brada, and DJ Ensian, will be competing for the top prize. Other county schools competing include Broadneck, Annapolis, Arundel, South River, Old Mill, North County, Severna Park, and Spalding.
So what you're seeing here is a division in the black community
Audience participation
between those who want to be patient, like Washington, and those who are more vociferous, like Du Bois. Difference of opinion going into the 20th century as to how to proceed.
A van bus to get us there.
But under white rule, this is the reality for blacks living in the South. Segregation is the reality. Separate facilities, individual businesses, and municipalities are allowed to discriminate. Why? Because the Supreme Court says that you cannot tell an individual they can't discriminate. The 14th Amendment says the government shall not discriminate. It doesn't say the individual can't discriminate. The individual is free to discriminate all they like. And that, moving forward, is going to lead to a number of Supreme Court decisions that put segregation in place as the reality in the South. I gotta move. In 1883, something called the Civil Rights Cases overturns the Civil Rights Bill of 1875 that forbid discrimination in public places. The Civil Rights Bill of 1875 said that restaurants, theaters, railroads, they could not discriminate on the basis of race. And the Supreme Court says, no, that's unconstitutional. If a person wants to be a bigot, they can be a bigot. Let them be a bigot. The 14th Amendment says that the government can't discriminate. Individuals are free to discriminate all they like. Now, most people don't know about the civil rights cases of 1883, although that is on the test. But everybody knows Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson is the famous case that argued that separate but equal facilities were inherently okay. Now, this was all a Supreme Court case regarding separate rail facilities, but everybody associates Plessy versus Ferguson with schools. Because in Brown v. Board of Ed in 1954, Plessy versus Ferguson is overturned. And this is really the beginning of the modern civil rights movement that goes into the late 50s, early 1960s. But the reality is, between 1880 and 1954, blacks have got decades of segregation, discrimination, and limits on their freedom. Limits on their ability to vote. They have to pass literacy tests. They had to pay poll taxes. Their grandfathers had to have voted in the 1860 election. What black guy is voting for Abraham Lincoln in 1860? So there were ways through these Jim Crow laws that Southerners got around that pesky Constitution and found ways to limit who voted. Today, they just say you need a driver's license. It's a poll tax. It's a way to limit people. Because if you're poor, i.e., and you're black, you probably don't have a car or a driver's license. You can't vote. And then lynchings were the ultimate threat and intimidation. All right, folks.